Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. Today we're going to continue reading from the topic, Back to Godhead, letters from Srila Prabhupada where he describes what's necessary to be able to go back to Godhead. If I do this, I can see your comments. But I don't think I did it well. Hold on. Someone write a comment so I can see it. Comments will appear. So, yes, we're going to do kirtan. I have a new mixer with to make everything more like a concert. So today's the day. So we'll see how that sounds. And I just want to know now if it sounds good. It's not too loud, too quiet. I need to know. So before we begin, let me know it's not too loud, not too quiet. Everything is good. Krishna, Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Ram. Yeah, it sounds good. Okay. So we'll do a little kirtan and then we'll begin. Continuing to read from where we left off yesterday. Hare Krishna. So if there's any I just have to listen. Excuse me. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna. Like we're in the studio, right? Radha Madhava Punjabi Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasoranandana Braja Janaranjana Jasoranandana Braja Janaranjana Jasoranandana Braja Janaranjana Jasoranandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Welcome to all of you. Yesterday, I was playing around with my song, Trinadapi Sunichena. It's a beautiful song, a beautiful verse, and I will perform it for you. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe sometime. Okay. So let's begin reading from where we left off. 1 second, I want to move the keyboard. So I've added some more verses to the document we're reading from, and not verses, letters, excuse me, and they're very similar. And I specifically put in similar letters because I just wanted to make it clear, and I think sometimes emphasis is, just reading the same thing over and over again, it emphasizes the point, and I think that's healthy and good. So, Hare Krishna to all of you. So I have to now remember where we left off, which is, I think we only read like 3 letters so far. Kamania, are you here? Can you help me? I think I know where we are. I think it's 7112. It's a letter written 3rd of December 1971. And as I've often said, if we've read the letter before, by reading it, we'll remember. Please accept my blessings. I am in due receipt of your kind letter of November 12th, 1971. And I have appreciated the contents with great pleasure. Yeah. So the letter is posted here. You can follow it. Radha and Krishna have been so much merciful upon me to have given me so many nice spiritual sons and daughters as yourselves. I can see by the photos of your Los Angeles temple that you are all very good servants of Radha and Krishna, and that they are very much pleased by your service. He's looking at the pictures of the deities. And Prabhupada could see how nicely the deities were dressed, and he could understand the level of devotion and advancement by seeing the deities. So Prabhupada would study the deities. He could tell a lot about the temple by seeing the deities, and a lot about the pujaris by seeing the deities. And so by seeing these photos, he's affirming that they're doing well. He can see that their consciousness is good. Even one time when Prabhupada ate the Mahaprasadam, he could understand that the cook was a good devotee and was strictly following by tasting it. And he called the cook up and he said, "Thank you for following the regulative principles." That Prabhupada could understand by eating the prasadam. Interesting. Prabhupada could understand a lot about a devotee by looking at their service. And so I can see by the photos of your Los Angeles temple that you are all very good servants of Radha and Krishna, and that they are very much pleased by your service. So he could see that they were doing nicely, and Krishna was pleased, and Prabhupada knows when the deities are pleased. Prabhupada can talk to the deities, he can see it. He's confirming that Krishna is happy with their service, which is a nice letter to get, isn't it? Thank you very much for assisting me in this way. Now, my one request to you all is that you become fully happy by conducting your lives in Krishna consciousness. Yes, we read this yesterday. Now we remember. And you can know it for sure that in this way you will come with me back home, back to Godhead. And so we had discussed a little bit yesterday how Prabhupada's happy when we're happy. He wants us to become happy. So in that sense, it's our duty to figure out how to be happy in Krishna consciousness. Although, that goes contrary to, it seems to go contrary to everything we've learned, that I shouldn't be thinking about my happiness. But it's a little different, because I was just thinking this morning about how important it is to be situated stably in your varna and your ashram. And when you're stable in your varna and ashram, then you're stable in your devotional service. And when you're stable in your devotional service, you make advancement. So if I have to do something to stabilize my devotional service, it may be something material, like finding a different service or changing an ashram. But because it's in connection with Krishna, we wouldn't say it's material. We would say it's spiritual. And we would say it's spiritual because it's a foundation which is necessary so that I can be happily engaged. And when I'm happily engaged, then I become steady. When I become steady, then that steadiness helps me become Krishna conscious. So to be in a situation where we can be steady usually requires that we're satisfied, at least sufficiently materially. And so when we said yesterday, or was it the day before, we were saying that find out how to become happy in Krishna consciousness. It's for Krishna's service, because I'm a conditioned soul. It's almost like saying, make sure you're healthy so you can serve Krishna. It's the same idea. So, this is just a practical reality of life. That it's like eating. If you're hungry, how can you do service? You'll be thinking about eating. So if you're not stable in your ashram, in your varna, in your service, in your sadhana, then it becomes difficult to advance. So these things have to be taken care of. And don't ever think that if you make adjustments so that you can be satisfied in a way that you can be steady in Krishna consciousness, that's not Krishna consciousness. What Prabhupada's saying here, we can read that into this. Because if I say Krishna Karshani, Gopalananda, Krishna, Anuradha, Vijay Lakshmi, if I say, I want you to be happy, Deepa, Sangita, I want you to be happy in Krishna consciousness. Let's say I said, I want you to figure out how to be happy in Krishna consciousness. You might say, I already am. Fine. But maybe you're not completely happy. And I say, I want you to figure out how to be happy. And I want you to make that your service to figure out how to be happy. And then you think, oh, that's an interesting service. I've been given a service to figure out how to be happy. So obviously, it doesn't mean go to Disneyland. I'm saying how to be happy in Krishna consciousness. I want you to figure out how to be happy in Krishna consciousness. And you start thinking, well, I really like to cook. Maybe I should cook for the deities. Or I really like learning verses, but I haven't been doing it lately. So maybe I should put more time into learning verses. Or whatever it is. Or, I really think I'm in the wrong ashram. Wrong could be brahmachari to grihastha. It could be grihastha to vanaprast. Or, maybe I would be inspired more. I've always wanted to be a sannyasi since I was like 6 months old, and that inspires me. Whatever it is. I always wanted to start a temple like that. So you think, what would make you happy? And then when you get that combination, you'll find that you'll be enthusiastic and you'll be steady in your bhakti. And that's what we want, right? So that's why I said it's not material to think that way, because it's supporting you. This morning I was thinking of a problem that is coming to my attention quite often, is that a devotee is doing well, then at some point they're not doing well, and Krishna Karshani was asking, why does this happen? And there are many reasons, and one reason I was thinking this morning is that sometimes situations just change. So you're doing well in a certain situation, and then you go into a new job, a marriage, you just got married, you've just moved to another place. Something disturbed your natural regulated life. Something disturbed the way things were going when they were good, when you were stable. Or it might be that you were living in the Dham and you were very Krishna conscious. Then you come back and you go back to school, you go back to work, or you're dealing with a different environment. So it disrupts it. So it destabilizes you. Oh, I don't have enough time in this situation to chant and this and that. So one of the things we need to do is be like Prabhupada. Wherever Prabhupada went, he just resumed his normal life. So we want to create stability wherever we don't want to be destabilized, because that becomes dangerous. So we want to create stability in our lives so that stability can foster steady sadhana, steady service, can foster peacefulness, happiness, so that we can be Krishna conscious. So that's something to think about. It's not, I know devotees get thrown off because they think, well, I'm not supposed to think about myself, and I'm not supposed to think about my happiness. But as I've said many times, many a devotee has surrendered themselves right out of ISKCON. And that was Krishna Karshani's point, that sometimes you surrender too much and you're not ready for that, and you destabilize your life by giving up things that you need or neglecting things that you need, and then you surrender yourself right out of Krishna consciousness. That sounds funny, right? Prabhu, what happened? I surrendered myself right out of bhakti. How do you do that? You take on too much and you destabilize yourself. Right? So you will find amongst devotees who are very blissful, devotees who are advanced, there's something or a few things that they really, so to speak, like to dig their teeth into. They really like. And the more they do that, the more blissful they are. It's just natural. So those things that really give you energy and enthusiasm are very important for you. So that's an answer to why one may not be happy or one may have difficulty. They're in a good situation, and then some situation changes and it disrupts that, and they're not doing what they did before. So you want to, like I said, be like Prabhupada, who just flies into a new country, a new time zone, and just continues what he normally does. Doesn't allow the situation to disrupt him. So that's important, right? You agree? Okay, I'm going to bring my phone up closer. I haven't done this before. I have my computer right in front of my phone. And I have to be able to reach it. So, let's see. I'm going to go back because I think there's some comments. I feel, so Ankush says, I feel following Mother Kunti prayers is very tough to follow by asking for misery, distress, and at the same time ask to be happy spiritually. It's tough practically. Please try to help understand. Well, you may not be ready to offer those prayers. So, you can pray those prayers, but it's better you pray the prayers that you actually mean and feel. So the prayers are there for you. There they are. They're there for you to look at and meditate on and try to understand. And maybe for you now, Ajay, it's just for you to meditate on philosophically, to understand what's going on, why she was willing to accept suffering, and the benefits that the suffering brought to her. And pray that you can also someday see the practical benefit of suffering and be able to pray to Krishna that if that's what's necessary to bring me closer to you, then please, I'm ready for that. You know, the prayer is whatever's necessary for my advancement, give it to me. But if you're not ready for it, then it would be artificial and strange to pray for it because you don't even mean it. So I would say, you know, first, get ready for it. Second, pray for it. Someone might say, but if I pray for it, will it get me ready? Maybe. That's another option. I'll leave that option open to you. Vijay Lakshmi says, I like reading Srimad Bhagavatam very much and listening to your lectures. Yeah, so keep moving in that direction. Hare Krishna Kama Gayatri Gomati Ganga. Radha is asking, under the AKA Eddie, how we can to find, that's how you speak English if you're from Colombia, how we can to find the stability when we have deep changes in our lives. Our stability has to be our sadhana and our service. So when we have changes going on in our life, grab hold to those pillars. You know, it's like there's a storm. It's so windy, you're being blown and there's a pillar there. Just hold on to it. Those are your pillars. You're rising early, you're chanting your rounds, you're studying Prabhupada's books. And what service you have, those are your pillars. So no matter how strong the storm is, hold on to those pillars. It's when you give up those pillars, then you're in trouble. And the story of Maharaj Bharat, that's the story of someone whose situation changed. Of course, it was voluntary. He had a baby deer, a doe, to take care of. So that changed his situation. And he allowed that to disturb his sadhana. So he's a perfect example of what we're talking about. Situation changed now. It was like he had a baby almost. And he became attached, and because of that attachment, he was giving more and more time to that doe. And he was giving so much time that he started neglecting his sadhana. So that's the key here. Understand, I would say, Radhapriya, understand what gives you stability. Where are your stable factors? You know, like Vijay Lakshmi said, hearing Bhagavatam, hearing lectures, that's a source of intense, a great stability for her. What are your stable factors? And then do your best to not let those things go when the turbulence comes or the situation changes. Grab onto those. As long as you can grab onto those, it creates familiar stability. So, you know, being familiar with those practices, doing those practices that have given you strength, continue. It's good advice when you go to the Dham and you come back to the West, or there's a big festival at the temple for a few days, and then you go back to your life. Grab onto, use that strength to grab onto those things that help you. And don't let any storm pull those out of your hand. Always hold on to them. That's important. Because again, this whole discussion is being precipitated by Prabhupada's statement, be happy in Krishna consciousness. And so again, I ask the question, what do you need to be happy in Krishna consciousness? And whatever that is, don't give that up when situations change. Always understand, I need to do this no matter what. Obviously, sometimes you can't do everything because it's not practical in a certain situation. You might be traveling, there may not be facility. But as far as possible, you try to create facility to do those things which will inspire you. And there's a letter we're going to read, I think, that underscores this. It's about enthusiasm and how important enthusiasm is. So, like I said before, it does sound like this is not our philosophy. But if you study everything Prabhupada says, you will see that he does say these things. Find a service that's satisfying. Be happy in Krishna consciousness. If marriage will make you more peaceful, then you can get married. There was never like, oh, I want Prabhupada, I'm more inspired to do this service. It wasn't, generally speaking, unless Prabhupada needed that person to do another service, generally speaking, that's fine. You want to get married? Fine. Like that. Unless he thought some devotee was meant for sannyas. But in general, okay, what you need to become peaceful, what you need to become stable, do that. So I think that's important. And I would like to reframe surrender in this context. Because if you do this, you'll make advancement. And so we should call this surrender. If I'm surrendered, according to the principles, the first principle of surrender, which is do what's favorable. Anushilanam means favorable. Do what is favorable for bhakti. There's 6 symptoms of surrender. The first one is accept what is favorable. The second one is reject what's not favorable. So, changing varna, changing ashram, setting aside some time to do things that inspire me. Not that you neglect your service, but setting aside time you can find to do things that are very inspirational. If that empowers you in your service, in your sadhana, in your advancement, then we should call that surrender. That's using your intelligence. You could say surrender of your intelligence to figure out how to advance. So you are surrendered because you're figuring out what's going to help you become Krishna conscious. This is very, very important. And if you don't understand this, you could surrender yourself right into like losing your enthusiasm. You could surrender yourself into having difficulty in Krishna consciousness, not being happy in Krishna consciousness. You could surrender yourself into the wrong ashram or the right ashram with the wrong person. I told you this really unfortunate situation. That years ago, one leader would match couples to marry by incompatibility because he thought if they're incompatible, their marriage won't be good, and naturally that would breed detachment. I don't like my wife doesn't like the husband, so we naturally become detached. I'm serious. This was probably 90s, late 80s, 90s, Crazy. He doesn't do this now, and I'm sure he will admit that he was crazy then to say such things. But anyway, it's kind of a similar thinking, But the actual reality is, we look for compatibility, and if there's compatibility, they get along where there's less friction, there's more harmony, there's less disruption in the marriage, and that naturally fosters a better situation for being Krishna conscious. If the marriage is if you're always fighting with someone, you're always disturbed, how is that going to help you? Yeah, it might help you in detachment. Oh, this is just what I needed to take sannyas. If I didn't marry this woman, I could never be renounced. Okay, maybe. But the fact of the matter is, if you're not really renounced, no woman's going to really make you renounced per se. You have to actually have it. So even it's kind of a false argument in most cases. It can give you some realization, but, not every woman is like that woman. It was just an incompatible situation. So we create stability, we create an environment where we're peaceful, and then we use that environment to surrender. Exactly. So now I'm in this situation. I don't have to worry about marriage anymore. I don't have to worry about my education, my career. This is all, I've solved it all. I've settled it. I'm doing it. Have a service I like. everything's good. Now I can fully give myself. But if it's not, then when you give yourself, it's kind of like fasting. You can only fast so long because you have certain needs. I'm just being practical, but I just want you to understand it like it's kind of like a mathematical equation. If I do this, which doesn't seem to be surrender, but it produces surrender, and if I do this, which seems to be surrender, but it doesn't produce in the long run a good result, then that's not surrender. That's not favorable. So you have to think in terms of what's favorable, right? If I do A, B, and C, down the road, will I be Krishna conscious or will I end up not Krishna conscious? If I will end up Krishna conscious, why would there be any doubt that I should do it? And if I'm not going to end up Krishna conscious by surrendering, so-called, why should there be a doubt that I should do that? Now, of course, your temple president, your authorities may ask you to do something. But if you use this criteria, you could also discuss with them that, when I do this service, it's easier for me, better for me. I remember, sometimes men would go on Sankirtan and they had really difficult time. And so sometimes we'd have to take them off, let them go on Harinam for a week or two, build their strength. Because they were becoming disturbed. They were, during the day in the parking lots, it's all women, and they felt weak. And so they liked to do kirtan, so they would go to the college program and preach and like that. And some of them would stay in the college program. Some would be fine, go back on book distribution. Some of the Sankirtan devotees were managers, leaders. They wanted to run temples. That was where their inspiration lied. So these adjustments were made. It's not like the end of the world that you're not on book distribution. Now you're running a temple. What a valuable, intimate service that is. So all service is valuable. Of course, if your spiritual master says, do this, generally you want to do that. But still, there can be some discussion if you feel that down the road you would lose your enthusiasm or lose your stability, or it would be harmful. Now, having said that, you might say, well, isn't it the fault of the devotee that it's harmful? And the answer is, in many cases, the answer is yes. Those men on Sankirtan should not be disturbed. It's their fault. Or that devotee doing this service that his guru wants him to do should not lose enthusiasm, should not be hesitant, and so forth. But you have to deal with realities. The reality is that devotee is having difficulty, or he's not inspired in this service. So you have to deal with these realities. That's just common sense. Okay. Kamalakshi Radhika says, I don't pray for misery. It just comes. Okay, there's your... Ajayanitai, you don't have to worry. Even if you don't pray for it, it'll come. But when I don't know, right? Kamalakshi, I don't know if you realize how funny that is. I don't think you meant that to be funny. I don't have to pray for misery. It comes anyway. But when it does, I can recognize that I am closer to Krishna. That this time I reached out and sought his shelter, and I feel his mercy and love. I recognize that what Queen Kunti is saying is completely correct. At that time, I am also close to Krishna. But right now, I pray I can remember him when I am not suffering. Easier to remember when you're suffering sometimes than when you're not. I think, Kamalakshi, what you said, everyone has experience of this. It's often like you look back at your life and you think, all those difficult times I had during those times, many of those times, if not all of them, I was more Krishna conscious, my rounds were better, I prayed more, I read more, and so forth. And at the same time, you often look back and say, but that way was so difficult. I don't want to go through that. Even though it was so good, I don't want to go through that again. So there's the dichotomy. It was like, yeah, that was such a good time for me, but I wouldn't really pray to want to go through it. Now, if you're more advanced, you would to say, okay, if that's what it takes, I'll go through it, if that's necessary for my advancement. It's a more advanced stage. But at least at Jainita, you can appreciate that the difficulties you went through were beneficial for you, right? Thank you for that, Kamalakshi. I don't pray for misery. Of course, non-devotee would pray for misery. All right, we'll make a t-shirt. I pray for misery. It keeps me closer to God. You know, it's like I'm tolerating happiness and I'm praying for misery. Like, the Hare Krishnas are nuts. Crazy. These people, you know, headlines. Hare Krishnas tolerate happiness and pray for misery. Read all about it. They're crazy. Yeah, that's a compliment. We're crazy. Excuse me, are the Hare Krishnas crazy? Yes, we're crazy. That's our brand. We must be crazy in your eyes if we're actually spiritualists. If you don't think we're crazy, we must be doing something wrong. Of course, we don't want people to think we're crazy, but I'm just speaking philosophically that if they examine our philosophy and lifestyle, they might think we are if they're very materialistic. And that's okay. That's a good sign. Is it, so Krishna Karshani says, is it not that to be happy in Krishna consciousness, we first have to learn how to be happy in general? I noticed that there is a group of devotees who think Krishna wants us to suffer, and that our suffering is giving pleasure. Is that what you're going to say? Pleasure to Krishna. The only thing that gives pleasure to Krishna is that you take a step closer to him. And if you're not going to take a step closer, or you're shuffling your feet and it's going to take you lifetimes, Krishna may create a situation that you move closer, but it's not like he likes to see you suffer. He's pushing you closer through suffering because he wants to see you happy, and he knows that if you come closer, you'll be happy. And I think it's important for all of us, as I've said many times, to be intelligent enough to know that the very things that caused us frustration were the very things that brought us to Krishna. And if we go back to those things, they're going to cause us frustration and suffering again. So don't bring suffering upon yourself. But if we're foolish, Krishna may have to bring suffering upon us so we get the message. If we get the message through Prabhupada's teachings, if we have that intelligence, why would Krishna have to bring suffering? Why would he have to create any difficulty for us? Because we're moving forward because of our own initiative, our own intelligence. But if there's strong attachment and we just can't pull ourselves from it, sometimes Krishna will create some suffering surrounding that attachment and just remind us. You already know this will cause you suffering, but you forgot, and I'm just reminding you. Because if you look at your life, isn't it true that in general, aside from the threefold miseries that are bashing everyone, that everyone has to tolerate, but isn't it true that generally when we suffer, it's arranged to detach us from something we're attached to? So when we try to enjoy it, Krishna creates a situation where we suffer. We get slapped in the face. And then the message is really clear. That was a hard slap. The message is clear. This is my attachment. Krishna has prevented me from engaging in it. And if I had engaged in it, it would have harmed me. So Krishna has just slapped some intelligence into me because I did something stupid. Has Krishna ever done that to you? Slapped intelligence into you? Krishna will slap intelligence into you if you don't have it. if you have it, why would he have to slap intelligence into you? It's not that he wants to do that. He doesn't want to do that. Believe me, everything you read in Bhagavatam, everything the acharyas say, is that Krishna just wants to serve his devotee, and please his devotee, but this is how in a state where we're not intelligent, this is how Krishna serves us, by creating some situation where our attachment ends up causing us suffering, and then we pull back from that attachment before we became immersed in it or fell into illusion because of it. If you have that experience, give me a smile or a heart. And if you don't have that experience, it may be that you actually have that experience, but you just never thought of it that way. Of course, if you do something stupid and you hurt yourself, that's different. Or you have, the laws of nature are working. You operate some machinery and you hurt yourself because you're not doing things correctly. That's a different thing. But if you notice that Krishna is causing you suffering in a particular situation that you're attached to, and you think, Krishna's amazing. He knows what I need. And he's everywhere. And he's right here with me knowing that this is what I need. So then you can celebrate. Okay, I see a message coming. We'll get to it. I have the perfect example. I get these little flashes when you send messages. It pops up on the screen in front of the other messages that I'm reading. Okay. Krishna Karshani says, I understand your points, but is it not risky to think that external things like changing service or ashram will make us happy? I noticed that helps only for a moment, and in most cases, a person whoops, I lost it. Back. I noticed that it helps only for a moment, and in most cases, a person is not changed. External attitude changing, external won't help. Don't you think we have to learn to be happy in all circumstances by learning ourselves to be happy? Many of us just used to be happy, and after joining, used to be unhappy after joining Krishna consciousness, we became unhappy. If the changes are whimsical, if the changes are not you could say done with the wise counsel of other devotees who agree that in this situation you are not being Krishna conscious. You're not. It's an impediment. This situation is an impediment for these reasons, and you're more suited to this and that. In that situation, I would say yes, those changes are important. What you're talking about is an unstable, whimsical person who's always changing and always looking for solutions in external situations. And that's totally true. And thank you for bringing that up, because we've seen that. I remember the story, not the story, but the situation is that sometimes we had brahmacharis who would just be temple hopping. They never found the right temple, but it's because either they were in the wrong ashram or they weren't doing the right service, or they didn't know what their service was. And once they found that service or found that ashram, they didn't do that. So if you get wise counsel of experienced devotees and you're saying, I think I should change this and that, they may say, no, I don't think you should change this or that. I think what you need to change is that. So then it's not a whimsical thing. I would say it's more of a scientific thing. You're scientifically looking at a devotee situation to determine why they're unstable. And in some cases, what you say is totally true. they're unhappy, unsettled people, and they'll just tend to be unhappy and complain no matter where they are. That's obviously an internal problem. Still, with those people, creating the right Varna ashram situation is going to help. But it is true, some people by nature are more pessimistic than others. Some people by nature are more unhappy than others. And that's why sometimes you might meet a person who's not a devotee and externally they seem quite happy because it's their nature. And then you see the devotee and externally they're a bit grumpy and they have their faces always drawn. It's actually in the DNA. At least this is what psychologists say, that about 50% of your happiness is already within your DNA. You may have that nature. So that's true. Someone may just have a satisfied or an unsatisfied nature. But still, philosophically speaking, to be situated in the right varna and ashram is our siddhanta, isn't it? So we have to put our best foot forward. We have to try to help that devotee in the best way we can. And once we find out what would be best for that devotee, then we can tell them that no material situation is perfect. No material situation is in and of itself is going to make you Krishna conscious. But you have to make the effort. You have to, be tolerant in these situations, even if they're more ideally suited for you, but you still have to be tolerant. You still have to make the effort. And that point Prabhupada always made, and it's a quite interesting point, because you have what appears to be a paradox in that we're always talking about depending on Krishna and depending on the Guru. At the same time, Prabhupada's, in one sense, saying you can't depend on anyone but your own effort to follow. So you depend on the Guru in the sense that he gives you everything you need. But if you don't execute it, then he can't help. Ultimately, he can't help you. So it always boils down to personal effort, personal endeavor. So, you can have the right guru, the right sangha, the right varna, the right ashram, everything right. You can still mess it up. It's not guaranteed, that's for sure. As we said a few months ago, there's nothing you can't do to make ISKCON worse. We all have the potential to mess up, no matter who we are, no matter how well situated we are. We all have the potential to make mistakes, right? We all have the potential to do something stupid. Not that you will, but the potential is there, free will. So no matter how well situated you are, if internally you're disturbed, that's a problem. But sometimes the internal disturbance is just wrong varna, wrong ashram, wrong this, wrong that, Even it's like, sometimes you eat certain foods and they put you to sleep, isn't it? So, okay, I shouldn't eat that food. Or you eat a certain food and your body becomes a gobar gas tank and you're just passing gas. You could probably run a stove. It's creating so much gas in you. It's the wrong food. If you give me cucumbers, I could become a gobar gas tank. I can't digest cucumbers unless they're pickles. Don't ask me why, but I can't eat raw cucumbers. It just produces gas. Gobar gas, you put cow dung in a tank and it ferments, and it's basically like, fermented digestion producing air. So, we're all individuals, and some things are just better for us and some things aren't. So I think it's a balance of both. Thank you for pointing that out. Deepak says, the difficulty is to do bhakti when happy. It's easy when you're suffering. The real test is when you're happy and have this same desire for bhakti, same desire for Krishna, correct? That's true, but I was referring to spiritual happiness, not material happiness. And it also depends who you are, because, Sudama Vipra, when he won the jackpot, he just, he used that for Krishna because he was so Krishna conscious. So, that palace and all the money and everything, it didn't really make him materially happy because he was renounced. He was a Brahmin. Those things don't make him happy. So if material things make you happy to the extent that they make you happier than Krishna consciousness and they're really important for you, then yeah, you could have trouble. But if you're Sudama Vipra, you won't have trouble because you're detached. So it's the attachment to those things that's the problem. But I wasn't referring to the happiness of sense gratification. I was referring to the happiness of being Krishna conscious. I was referring to that being necessary. So we would not strive for material happiness, but sometimes, just like Kamalakshi said, I don't pray for misery, it comes. I don't pray for material happiness, it also comes. But then we use it for Krishna. But if I become attached to it, then it's a problem. Anything I'm attached to that's not Krishna, that's a problem. For sure, it's an addiction. Like, people are addicted to happiness, isn't it? Sense gratification is the number one addiction, and it just takes different forms. It's, I'm addicted to alcohol. No, you're addicted to sense gratification. Alcohol is just your addiction of preference. Someone else is addicted to football. Someone else is addicted to skiing. Someone else is addicted to playing the guitar. It's just, you might say, well, it's better to be addicted to playing the guitar than drinking alcohol. That's true. But, if I'm just doing it for my happiness, it's an addiction to sense gratification. If I'm doing it, so I have to do it. I have to take these addictions and transfer them to service. Then we're okay. But it's true. If we're not Krishna conscious, in a situation where there's material happiness, intense material happiness, it can be very difficult. But if you're detached, then you're okay. And if you need to suffer, like we said, Krishna will give you a dose. He knows what you need. If you become detached, he doesn't have to give you the dose. So you decide. You want to give the dose to yourself by austerity, or you want him to give it to you? Jyotirmayi says, unfortunately, I have the perfect example of whatever happens in life, there's nothing to be done to bring someone close to God. My mother, she's 80 years old and suffering of old age problems. And still now, with death so close, so much physical and emotional suffering, she doesn't call God for help. She calls Mom. Yeah, my father was in the same situation. Anyway, she has a daughter who's a devotee. Prabhupada's mercy on her. Prabhupada was asked, Srila Prabhupada, what happens to the parents of devotees? When they die, Prabhupada said they become liberated. And the devotee said, what does liberated mean? Because, do they go to Brahman and merge, or they go to Vaikuntha? Prabhupada said they become devotees in their next life. Nice. Your mother's going to be a devotee. Don't worry. Just let her die in peace. She'll take birth in the womb of a devotee. 20 years from now, she'll be out on Sankirtan. Ecstatic. Maybe you'll meet her on the streets of London or something. Or Amsterdam. Or Greece. Piyush Kumar. Could you please help in how to deal with fear of commitment vows arising of repeated failures on attempts to keep even small vows? Interesting question. I could give general answers, but I would suggest that you be specific because, well, let me throw one thought out. You may, it's possible, I could be wrong, but I'll throw this out. You may have a fear of commitment, and you may equate a commitment with a lack of freedom, and you may equate a lack of freedom with unhappiness. So you might have equated commitment with unhappiness, and so whenever you're asked to commit, you back off at some point because you're feeling you're losing freedom, and then you feel you're losing misery. And so a lot of people equate commitment or responsibility with just being restricted. And so if this is the case, you have to equate vows with something positive. Like, this is beautiful. Vows are beautiful, and vows and commitments are actually open the door to freedom and real happiness. And so if you reassociate commitment and vow with happiness and freedom, then if you have that problem, then you would be able to overcome that. Because it's a fact, Piyush, if you continually take a vow and fail, it is going to create that fear. The next thing I would say, and this could be your situation or another person's situation, sometimes we're taking vows for things we can't actually do, and so we're setting ourselves up for failure. So let's say, it's like, it's just interesting. It's just psychology. Let me close this blind a little. The blinds will make us more blind. They will blind out the sun. So here's the psychology, Piyush. Let's say you have taken a vow to chant 16 rounds, but you can only chant 8, or 4, or 2, or 12, whatever it is. So let's say you could only chant 8, and so you chant 8 and you think, I'm such a failure, I only chant 8. Well, what if you take a vow to chant 8? And now you're a success. Interesting, right? Then you might say, but we're supposed to chant 16. And I'll say, yes, we're supposed to, but you're not doing it. And by setting that goal for yourself, you're just becoming discouraged. Whereas if you do 8 and that's your goal, yes, I did 8, I'm a success. But if you do 8 and 16 is your goal, oh, I'm so bad, so useless, what's the use? I try to do 16, but I can't. So that's one thing. The last thing I would say, and I hope all bases are covered with this. Sometimes when you want to follow a vow, you don't have the right support system, so you can't follow it until you get that support system of other close relationships with other people who are also trying to follow that vow. Like, we started this sexual sobriety support group because a lot of men can't do it on their own, and they run into difficulties. And so they need help. So with that support, they're able to do it. So sometimes on your own, you can't, and you need the support of others. You need a group, or just personal one-on-one association of a mentor, or both. So that's also, is it like if you're trying to follow something and you can't, don't give up. And usually what we do is we just try to follow. We try harder to do the thing that's not enabling us to follow. You need a different strategy. So sometimes just trying harder is not enough. You actually need a different strategy, which in this case, the example is you would associate with people who are also trying to do what you're doing, or struggling with what you're doing, and who are working on themselves, something like that. So I hope that helps. If it doesn't, you could ask more. No Greek salad for me. Don't give me. Yeah, I went to Ayurvedic doctor and he said, you're very vata, don't eat raw. So I stopped eating raw, and that helped. Well, I eat fruits, but fruits are different raw because they're cooked by the sun. But vegetable raw is different, at least for me. So that made a difference. But somehow or other, pickles, which are just cucumbers and vinegar or something, I can digest. I don't really eat pickles that often, but I can digest them. Ankush, can a grihasta be detached? I have a question for you, Ankush. Can a sannyasi be attached? And if the answer is yes to the second question, then the answer is yes to the first question. Anyone in any situation can be attached. Anyone in any situation can be detached. Hare Krishna. Okay, so now we're going to continue reading. And this is a letter called Back to Godhead in This Life. I'm going back to Godhead. Just waking you up in case you're not awake. Okay. So, this is a letter written on August 28th, 1972, to Babananda Das, who at that time I think was the sannyasi. Baba, as Prabhupada would say, Babananda. My special... no, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was still married. My special blessings for Palika and Kaushalya Prabhus, who are doing so much for our Lord. And they must be specifically blessed to go back home, back to Godhead, without any delay, for waiting for the next life. Thank them very much on my behalf. Wow, did you hear that? Were you awake? I'll read it again. Well, let's look at the sequence. He was married to Palika. I don't know if they're still married. At that point, probably still married. So, it looks like they were taking care of the deities or doing some other service that was very well done and important. And because of that, Prabhupada is saying or concluding they must be specifically blessed to go back home, back to Godhead, without any delay, which means this life, without any delay for waiting for the next life. Thank them very much. So now we're going to see a certain theme here coming up where Prabhupada, and we've already seen it twice today, where Prabhupada is thanking a devotee for their service, glorifying them for their service, and then telling them because of that service, Krishna is pleased, he is pleased, and they will go back to Godhead, or if they continue doing that, they'll go back to Godhead. This is the theme, and this is interesting. Because I think we had discussed this on Wednesday also. You please Krishna through pleasing the Guru. So Prabhupada's pleased, Krishna's pleased, and now, because of that, you can go back. You get to go back to God. You hit the jackpot. You please them. Okay. Ta-da. What do you get for the jackpot? One-way ticket, all expenses paid to Krishna Loka. That's kind of what, putting it in this context, but that's kind of what Prabhupada is saying. You've won the lottery because you've pleased Krishna. Wednesday we were reading a slightly different, where Prabhupada was saying, you engage fully in Krishna's service, and then you'll go back to Godhead, because there's nothing in your life but Krishna. So indirectly, you're saying you're pleasing Krishna. But another way of looking at that is there's only Krishna in your life, so why wouldn't you go back to Godhead? Right? It's time for mint oil inhaling. Can you smell it? Should I put it by the microphone? Do you smell it? Someone's going to invent that, You'll put a fragrance by the microphone, and then you're sitting in your room and you'll smell it. Why not? Someone will figure it out. Hare Krishna. So let's read the next letter. This is a letter written to a devotee named Tusta Krishna. This is 14th December 1972. And we've titled this, We'll Have Another ISKCON in the Spiritual World. And he was a follower, Tusta Krishna was a follower of a devotee named Siddha Swarup. And Siddha Swarup had a following and then joined, and that following became disciples of Prabhupada. They're after me. Somebody's after me. Was I supposed to do something this morning at 9 o'clock? I hope not. So, I got sidetracked. What was I saying? How could I forget? I was reading a comment by Gautam, and what do they say? I had a senior moment? No, that's a 5G moment. There's 5G up. It's destroying my brain. Siddhaswarup, yeah, okay. Yeah, he's connected with Tulsi Gabbard, yeah. So, all these devotees joined with him. He was like their guru. He was reading Prabhupada's books and, practicing Krishna consciousness. So he had a dedicated following, and that at some point he really felt ISKCON was going in the wrong direction, and he had a different vision for preaching, and he felt that what the devotees were doing was creating such, a couple things, but their presence on the street was creating really bad PR. It was inhibiting the preaching. There were other ways to make money. They ended up opening health food stores and restaurants. There were different ways, and different ways to preach. But what they were preaching was the same thing. It was just externally they were doing it differently. And so there was a little bit of a riff, and he felt comfortable on his own, so he went on his own. A lot of his people went, and then like that. So this letter, Siddhaswarup, a very advanced devotee, and so they're thinking, like he's special. So that's the context of this letter. Siddhaswarup is a good soul, but others should not be misled. Others should not be misled, meaning thinking that he's the only pure devotee in ISKCON. Anyone who is surrendered to the spiritual master is a pure devotee. It doesn't matter if Siddhaswarup or non-Siddhaswarup. That's kind of a pun on the word. Anyone who's surrendered to the Siddhaswarup means you've realized your relationship with Krishna. So Prabhupada's saying, anyone who's surrendered to the spiritual master is pure devotee, whether or not he's realized his relationship with Krishna, and whether or not it's Siddhaswarup or another devotee. It's kind of funny. Amongst ourselves, one should respect others as Prabhu, master. As soon as we distinguish, here is a pure devotee, here is non-pure devotee, that means I'm a nonsense. So that's interesting. And Prabhupada wants us to see all his disciples, all his followers as pure devotees, as long as they're purely following. That's really interesting. But I think what's more interesting is what Prabhupada's saying, if you don't see like that, you're a nonsense. Prabhupada used to say that. You are a nonsense. You are a nonsense. If you see, here's a pure devotee and he's not a pure devotee. Isn't that interesting? Why you only want to be in the spiritual sky with Siddhaswarup? Why not all? So it was kind of like, that group really didn't want to associate with ISKCON. It didn't want the public to associate them with ISKCON. So Prabhupada's saying, why do you just want to go back to Godhead and not associate with the devotees in ISKCON? I don't think Sister Krishna was saying, well, when I go back to Godhead, we'll have our own camp. But they were being aloof. So Prabhupada apparently is taking that one step further. Why you only want to be in the spiritual sky with Siddhaswarup? Why not all? If Siddhaswarup can go, why not everyone? Siddhaswarup will go, you will go, Shyama-Sundar will go, all others will go. We'll have another ISKCON there. Now, before I read the next sentence, which is really funny, I have to describe that most of you know that a man in Mumbai sold us the property we have in Juhu. But his intent was to keep the money and not give the property. And that's a long story. And I think Giriraj Swami will describe that in his upcoming book. I think he's writing it. It's a long story, but this man wanted to cheat us, and he thought he could through various means, through bribing government officials and bribing our own lawyers to work against us, that he, through some legal default, he would get the money, And then some requirement would be there on our part, and at a certain point we don't get permits and so forth. Can't build a temple, so we have to give the land back, and he keeps the money. Something maybe not exactly like that, but that was his intention. And so he was out to destroy the devotees in any way he could. It was horrible. So I'm going to read this sentence, and I'm going to add the next sentence. His name was Mr. Nair, and he lived, I believe, right across the street from the Juhu temple. So, why you only want to be in the spiritual sky with Siddha Sarup? Why not all? If Siddha Sarup can go, why not everyone? Siddha Sarup will go. You will go. Shama Sundar will go. Others will go. We'll have an ISKCON. We will have another ISKCON there. Of course, Mr. Nair must stay. So Prabhupada is just being funny. We'll have another ISKCON in the spiritual world. We'll all go. No problem. All my disciples are pure devotees. But Mr. Nair, rascal number one, no, he's not going. And if somebody does not go, then I shall have to come back to take him there. Heavy, right? One should remember this, and every one of my disciples should act in such a way that they may go with me, and I may not have to come back to take another birth. Wow. You remember we had this whole discussion about saying that, service to Prabhupada is to go back to Godhead. But then, on the other hand, the devotee doesn't want to go back to Godhead. He just wants to serve life after life. And so, often I've made that point that your service to Prabhupada is to go back to Godhead. And of course, if Prabhupada wants you to serve life after life in some other place, we'll do that. But here's a statement. And Prabhupada has made this statement in other places. Don't make me come back. So if you say, yeah, but, we should just serve. Okay, so let's rephrase it. Become a pure devotee. If you become a pure devotee, you won't have to come back. He'll engage you. Either you'll go back to Godhead or he'll engage you. So for the sake of Prabhupada, we should become pure devotees. We don't even want to be pure devotees. Right? But I may not want to be. But for the sake of Prabhupada, I will be. So, we're going to go back. I missed lots of things that were said. So Gautam said, I have lost everything. A lot of Gautam, losing everything is sometimes what happens to someone who Krishna wants to become a devotee, or someone wants to become a devotee, but they're weak and they need help. Krishna may do that. So there are many devotees that this happened to. They needed a little push, and Krishna pushed them. So maybe Krishna's pushing you. Maybe that's what's happening. Now's the time to take more shelter of Krishna, and you'll have everything, because if you have Krishna, you have everything. Prabhupada says in the teachings, this is from Vijay Lakshmi, in the teachings of Lord Kapila, to see Krishna, you need a spiritual master's blessings, mercy, and to get a spiritual master, you need Krishna's causeless mercy. So if you please your Guru, you please Krishna, and going back to God, it is easy. Try not to commit offenses during chanting, and sincerely chanting is enough to get you back to Godhead. Krishna will help the sincere devotee. This is a theme. How about a theme? This is a theme. Krishna will help you. Oops. That's a common theme. If you're sincere, Krishna will help you. And this is our saving grace. For whatever problem we have, if we're sincere, Krishna will help us. This is where we put all our hope. So we were talking about misery. Krishna Kirti says, how about you're a nonsense? What if you're not a nonsense? Well, that's like walking around telling people they're nonsense. How about I'm a nonsense? I don't know if you're a nonsense. I know I'm a nonsense. But when Prabhupada would call people nonsense, it was usually materialistic people who were opposing Krishna consciousness, who were not thinking clearly. Nilambari Dasi, welcome, says, for fully removing mucus from the body, vegan diet is best. This is allergy, though. Yeah, but this is different. This is allergy. This is not actually a cold or a cough or a flu or any of that. It's the pollen from the pine trees, which are everywhere around here. Apparently now the pollen is getting worse in September, but we're working on it through other natural. I haven't taken any allergy medicine in a long time, in a while. Okay, question from Andrea. I wanted to know what thought, intention, conscience we should distribute prasadam to the needy people. I tell you the context so that it is understood in one of his last classes. I recommended to a devotee the distribution of prasadam among her neighbors as a possible way to find motivation and engage in service. I'm going to start doing it as a way of following Prabhupada's instruction and Mahatma's instruction, but I don't know what intention I should put into that. Well, if you can go on Vedabase, I guess it's vedabase.com, and then search the word prasadam and read about prasadam distribution, I think that would best answer your question, because when you understand what prasadam is and why we distributed it and how Prabhupada encouraged it, then you'll be very inspired. Prasadam is service. So this may be the first time people do devotional service. And generally, if a person takes prasadam, it guarantees that in their next life they'll become humans. And it also guarantees in their next life they'll have an opportunity to do devotional service. And this may be the only devotional service they ever do in their life. So that's something you can meditate on. It's Krishna. You're giving them Krishna in the form of prasadam. Sundar Ananda, all the way from South Africa. Our philosophy as per Lord Chaitanya is dasa dasa anudas. We do not serve Krishna directly. Now, in some cases, like chanting Hare Krishna, we are, by Guru's mercy, in direct contact. Exactly. Relationship with Krishna. How to reconcile das, das, anudas, and direct relationship with Krishna, with His holy name. Because it's not really like we're in direct relationship. It's kind of like Prabhupada gives you the holy name, and so it's kind of like he puts your hand in Krishna's hand and goes, here, okay, now you can. It's like your father introduces you to the girl. So it's through your father that you met the girl, but now, okay, why don't you two talk? I approve of this girl, and if you want to marry her, I approve of it. It's all authorized, but on your own, you could never approach that girl. She wouldn't talk to you. She'd slap you in the face if you tried to talk to her. Her parents wouldn't even let you in the house to get slapped in the face. So in that way, you never see any direct connection with Krishna as independent or separate of your connection with your spiritual master and Prabhupada, because it's only by their mercy that it's happening. But the fact is, Krishna is His name. But unless you get the mantra through disciplic succession, then Krishna is not His name. But because you got the mantra through disciplic succession, Krishna is now present in His name. So when you chant, you're now directly associating. So it's like a chinta beta beta tattva, simultaneously one and different. Is that okay? That's my understanding. How could I chant Hare Krishna, and how could Krishna be present in his name if it wasn't that Prabhupada gave us the holy name? It wouldn't happen any other way. So, Prabhupada's giving us the holy name, that means Krishna is accepting us. And so we can chant, Krishna is accepting. Okay, you can chant Hare Krishna, I've accepted. Prabhupada is approved. If he approves, I approve. Okay, let's start chanting. Something like that. Gautam, all the best. Take advantage. Take advantage of, sometimes you have to take advantage of the difficulties. Put you at the feet of Krishna. Okay. We have a few more minutes. We can read something more. Yeah, this is good. I wanted to read this letter. This would be a good way to end class. So, you remember we began class, or early in the class, we were saying how to be properly situated to be happy. And otherwise, if we're not properly situated, we could become discouraged, unhappy, and so forth. So this letter talks a little bit about this. This is from 1972, 31st December. And this is to a devotee named Dhananjaya. I am especially glad to note that everyone is feeling so much enthusiasm to work very hard in this preaching mission. That enthusiasm must be maintained under all circumstance. That is our price for entering into Krishna's kingdom. And Maya is always trying to take away our enthusiasm to serve Krishna, because without enthusiasm, everything else is finished. So this last sentence, you've probably, if you've listened to me speak over the last year or two, you've probably heard me quote this last line many times. Because without enthusiasm, everything is finished. Enthusiasm is our energy. And if there's no enthusiasm, basically Prabhupada's saying, Maya will come and knock you out, more or less. So, let's go back and analyze this a little bit. First, Prabhupada notes the devotees are enthusiastic. Obviously, they wrote and told him, we're very enthusiastic about Krishna consciousness, or enthusiastic to work hard in preaching. Or they just sent results of preaching, and Prabhupada could see from that they're very enthusiastic. So he's responding to that I'm noting this, that you're enthusiastic. And then he goes on to talk about enthusiasm and how important enthusiasm is. Enthusiasm, no, it's in American English, it's enthusiasm. How important enthusiasm is as a foundational building block of Krishna consciousness. And so then Prabhupada goes on to say that enthusiasm must be maintained under all circumstances. So, and then he says that is our price for entering the kingdom and of Krishna. And so, why? What does this all mean? So then Prabhupada ends by saying, Maya is trying to take away your enthusiasm. Because if she can take away your enthusiasm, you'll give up Krishna consciousness. So just looking at it, it's very clear what Prabhupada's saying. I'm happy you're enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is necessary. And because it's necessary, you have to maintain it in all circumstances, because if you don't, if you allow Maya to take away your enthusiasm, she'll take it away, and then everything is finished. Everything is finished means your Krishna consciousness is over. Okay, so I think that's clear. And I've hopefully made it clear in past classes. So now, it's the same question that I asked, what do you need to become happy? I think it's the same question, what do you need to become enthusiastic? It's really the same question. But if the question, what do you need to become happy kind of doesn't sit right with you, then you can ask yourself this question. What do I need to do to be enthusiastic all the time in Krishna consciousness? So then you start thinking. Service, ashram, attitudes. Putting more emphasis on things which inspire me. I think you'll get the same answers. So that was my point, that if we're happily situated in Krishna consciousness, then we're on the path to success, because we'll get there. But if we're not happily situated, we're not enthusiastic, then Maya can just knock us off the path very, very easily. And Maya is doing that every day. You realize every day devotees are getting knocked off the path. It's true. Formerly they were enthusiastic. Something happened, they hit a bump in the road, and they get knocked off the path. And then their enthusiasm is lost. And then they start giving reasons why they can't be Krishna conscious or whatever. And they allow themselves to deviate. And then what do you do when you deviate from Krishna consciousness? You just go back and do what you did before you were a devotee. There's nothing else to do. Right? So, that's a good way to end this class. We started and end basically in the same way. That would make a nice t-shirt, right? Without enthusiasm, everything is finished. Is virtual online initiation valid according to rituals? Well, Prabhupada did initiation through mail and a tape. He gave the mantra on a tape. So following in that sphere, we can do online. The essence of the initiation, the ritual goes on in their local area. The essence of the initiation is to publicly take your vows to your guru in front of the deity and so forth. So that's the essence, and they've done the essence. And then they have their fire sacrifice in their own place. You're nonsense. I don't know. That wasn't that funny, Kirti. Maybe a t-shirt like, why am I still a nonsense? After Prabhupada has written 50 books, why am I still a nonsense? Maybe that t-shirt. Okay. Deviation from Krishna consciousness is karma. Not sure what you mean. Due to past karma? No. No. Your past karma can't make you or break you in devotional service. Jyotirmaya was a Zoom initiate. And look at, she's still here. The Zoom didn't blow her up. She's going strong. Okay. So we'll have japa at noontime for any of you who want to be around. That's 2.5 hours from now. Hare Krishna to all of you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hare Hare Bol.